And we're live. Welcome to the sixth edition of Community Currencies Now. I have an incredible guest. I don't know how we get these amazing guests every week. I guess I do. It's Julio and Gus. They have amazing connections here. So it's going to be a really exciting one. In this show, we will talk about how new crypto projects that are trying to start community currencies for people all around the world with the amazing tools that blockchain technology can provide. The lessons that they can learn from people who have started community currencies for the last several decades and have a lot of wisdom on the topic. So I'll introduce myself here. I'm Griff Green from the Common Stack. We're building community currencies focused on supporting public goods. And I'm joined by Julio. Julio, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is Julio Linares. I'm from Guatemala, originally, but now I'm based in Berlin. I work on universal basic income, trying to make it happen here. And yeah, I work on a project called Circles.
Nice.
Tomer, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. So I'm Tomer from Israel, today the CEO of Seedbed and the product lead of GoodDollar. Where in Seedbed I'm doing, it's a self-service community currency creation based on the Bancor initial invention of liquid tokens, also known as bonding curve, depending who did you learn from. This all wisdom that they've recorded. That's basically it. Seedbed is a self-service creation of community currencies that has a unique consensus mechanism of basically proof of stake for community currencies. That's me.
Nice. And we're joined by the legendary Tim Jenkin, who is actually being portrayed in a movie that came out this year, Escape from Pretoria. The famous actor that played Harry Potter is playing you because you have such an incredible story. I mean, this is where we have to start the show off with, because I mean, you went from being a revolutionary in South Africa, fighting against apartheid, making pamphlet bombs and like really spreading the good news of the ANC and anti-racism, which has a foothold in today's news today too. And then you, of course, eventually were arrested for this and sentenced to jail for 12 years. And you were able to break out of prison, making wooden keys and then escape to London, where you became one of the trailblazers in the cryptography space to actually communicate and send cryptographic messages in the 80s between Zimbabwe and South Africa and London, which is just wild. There wasn't even really an internet then. And then from there, you started one of the largest the largest community currency platforms the world has seen, the currency exchange system. And this is, if you could like tell us how you traveled that path, I'm sure it would be pretty entertaining.
Yes, well, thank you for having me on the show. It's great to be here and tell my story. In fact, it doesn't start with me being a revolutionary. In fact, it starts with me being the exact opposite. You know, I grew up in apartheid South Africa in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. And in a sense, I was a normal white South African before I got involved in politics. So had the normal white prejudices and, I thought everything was fine and it's the way it should be, and never questioned apartheid and never questioned anything. And it's really only when I left the country after completing my schooling, I went abroad for a short while just to do a gap year before starting university. And that opened my eyes, started to read books that were not available in South Africa and saw documentaries about apartheid. So I had to leave the country to find out about it. And then when I came back to South Africa, I was sort of angry, that I had lived this lie for 20 years and knew nothing about my country. And so I met a number of students at university, they were always the hotbed of revolutionary thinking and so on. And I met a guy, and after university, we traveled abroad again to make contact with the ANC. not with any plans to return to the country. We just wanted to find out more about our own country. The ANC was banned, a proscribed organization. And we were there for about a year and were about to return to South Africa when they said to us, guys, you're going back. Wouldn't you like to do something? So we said, well, what does do something mean? And they explained that, you know, the ANC is proscribed, and even though you're white, you're in a very good position to do things that Black people can't do. And so they trained us up in security things and how to operate an underground cell and to distribute literature, pamphlets, and write newspapers and duplicate stuff. And that's what we did. Went back to South Africa and were active for nearly 3 years in the underground, if you can call a two-man cell an underground. I mean, there were other people obviously operating in other places. But it was a very bleak time for the ANC. You know, they'd been banned and all its leaders were in prison. Nelson Mandela was imprisoned on Robben Island. And so we set up shop, set up a print shop, secret print shop, and we started producing leaflets. And we had to use some very novel methods, including what we call leaflet bombs. These were just exploding, not dangerous, but just exploding devices that threw leaflets up into the air because you couldn't stand on the street corner and just hand out stuff. So that's what we were doing for 2.5 years. And then eventually the police got onto us and arrested us. It's a very long story that I'm cutting short. But anyway, I ended up with a 12-year prison sentence, and my comrade at the time also ended up with a similar sentence. And we were sent to Pretoria Prison, 1,000 miles away, which is where the prison for white political prisoners was in those days. And well, our plan was right from the beginning was that we were going to escape. You know, we were totally embarrassed by this arrest. And we managed to figure out how to make keys to open the doors. Now, I'm not going to go into the detail of that. If you want to find out, well, you can watch the film that's doing the circuits, but there's also a couple of documentaries on YouTube, which you can find by looking for my name. So essentially—
And you wrote a book about it as well, right?
And I've written a book about it, which you can download from the internet. That was the original version of it. So we escaped from the prison, making wooden keys, had to open something like a total of 10 different doors to get out from our starting point. And not only got out of our cells, but because we had such a long start, they only discovered our escape the next day. We managed to get out of the country as well. So that was quite a major achievement, because afterwards was one of the biggest manhunts ever. So, cut a long story short, we got out of the country and eventually ended up living in exile. Well, I ended up in London, where I continued to work for the ANC. I was training activists to do more or less what we'd been doing, sending them back into South Africa. But from our experience, we realized that one of the big problems was the lack of proper communication. So, as you pointed out, it was way before the beginning of the internet. And that was one of the reasons why the ANC's underground struggle had not really taken off, because they had no way of communicating with their operatives, like the leadership were all out of the country. So ultimately we devised a secret, learned how to encrypt messages using very safe methods. But the question was, how do you communicate between South Africa and London and then back to Zambia when there's no internet? Well, we didn't know about there's such a thing as an internet, but computers were available. So again, to cut a long story short, we devised a system where the encryption encrypted a plain message, and then you pump that message out the back of the computer through an acoustic modem and recorded that onto a tape recorder. And then you could take that tape recorder to any telephone, usually a public telephone, just to be safe. And you would dial a number in London and then play that message down the telephone using a little speaker onto an answering machine in London. And then to pick up a message would be the reverse of that process. You would dial a number in London and an answering machine would automatically play an encrypted message back to you, which you recorded onto a tape recorder, and from the tape recorder back into the modem and then the computer, and you decipher it. And this actually worked amazingly well. You know, it was going for a year or two. And the messages, so for the first time ever, there was almost real-time communication between the leadership and the activists. And eventually this network spread all over. So in a way, we kind of invented our own internet to carry these messages.
That's incredible.
They were never cracked. Obviously, no one could figure out what was happening here. We know the British GCHQ were monitoring everything, but it's quite clear that no one ever was able to break our messages. So in 1990, Nelson Mandela was released and the political organizations, including the ANC, were unbanned. And the rest is history. And in 1994, Nelson Mandela became the president of South Africa. Now, all of us obviously expected huge change after 1994, but as the years went by, I didn't see much change at all. You know, the structures of apartheid remained in place. The economy remained in the hands of the white monopolists or the big corporations. And in a sense, we realized that although we'd won the political struggle, that was only part of the struggle. We hadn't won the main struggle, which is the economic struggle. So the guys who really controlled everything, controlled the government as well, were the money guys. And that suddenly dawned on me and other people. And so we started to look at alternative ways of doing money or alternative, you know, new economics and all kinds of alternative economic ideas. And that led me onto LETs. You know, I studied LETs and in fact participated in one in Johannesburg, but it wasn't terribly exciting and didn't last very long. But, you know, towards the end of the 1990s, the internet was taking off and all of us learned, well, I knew some programming from doing the encryption stuff. And we started to look at ways of creating an online LETs. And I developed some software in the early 2000s, but never really had a platform. You know, there was no organization to show it to until about 2002, when a group of people in Cape Town decided they were going to set up a traditional LETs group, and I joined that. And they were just going to do it the old way, you know, having paper directories and paper checks and, you know, the traditional LETs model. And I showed them the software that I developed, and everybody was quite impressed and thought this was kind of path-breaking, because we knew from the experience of other groups that most LETs never grew very big because all the work was done by an administrator or an administrative team, and it was very manual, and the transactions had to be entered onto a spreadsheet or in a paper ledger, and eventually it would be too much work and there'd be burnout, and you'd have to produce these monthly statements all on paper and use the postal system, and it was a lot of work, and you actually required money to do it, so you're always scrounging around for money, and if you couldn't get the money, then the whole thing fell apart. So it wasn't sustainable at all, you know. And to make it sustainable, it had to be online, because that meant that the administrative role was almost eliminated because it was all done by the computer. And people could manage their own accounts. They could upload photographs of their offerings and just put them on the website and have some blurb there saying, well, I'm offering, a bicycle and this is the price, and, give your address and a phone number and everything. And amazingly, it worked so well, we never imagined this group we'd never heard of a Let's group with more than 100 members, that was like considered a massive group. And within a few months, we'd reached 300, and we thought this thing was going to explode and fall over.
Yeah.
But it just kept going and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then other groups around the country heard about it, and they asked if they could be part of it. So we didn't quite know what to do, and we just replicated the system and gave them the software. And within that first year, there were 5 or 6 electronic lets in South Africa.
Wow.
And then the next stage was, well, now we've got all these things, how do we get them to talk to each other? They were sort of standalone entities, and people were moving around and wanted to trade with each other. And especially where, seaside places were offering accommodation, and the people living in the inland wanted to come and stay in these places. So we devised a way of allowing these groups to trade with each other. And although it's a very simple scheme, no one had ever really thought of it. In Australia, there had been a kind of super lets, but it also was a manual thing, and it was like a second level lets. So people would trade in their group, and then the group itself would trade with the central group, and it was immensely complicated and couldn't really work. And because it wasn't electronic. So we devised a way of doing it, and the system we invented involved having virtual members. So you could have a member who in effect had an account in each group. Because as you know, with lets, it's always got to add up to 0. Every sale must have an equal and opposite purchase. So it always adds up to 0. So if some of your credits are leaving the group and going somewhere else, then obviously it doesn't add up to 0. But we didn't want to have a second level lets that you traded with. But if you have virtual members, and that virtual member is in fact one virtual member, but with accounts in all groups, then if you're selling something to someone in another group, you actually sell it to the virtual member, who then, if that was a real person, would then take your goods, and the accounting would still add up to 0 because your seller's account would be credited and the virtual members would be debited.
You basically invented smart contracts.
Yeah.
Like at the 90s, that's what I'm hearing, like smart contracts in the 90s. Right?
Yeah, so that's how it works. So in effect, the virtual member stepped out of the one group and went to the other group, and then became the seller and sold it on to the target buyer. So that works very well, and that's essentially how it still works today. And we've got well, there's over 1,000 exchanges on the community exchange system, but I wouldn't like to say that many active groups, but there are, and then over 100 different countries. And trading works just as efficiently and smoothly as if you're trading locally, because you don't really need, as a seller or buyer, need to know what's happening in the background.
Yeah,
it works through a kind of third-party system that we call Clearing Central, which keeps all the conversion rates, and it keeps the destinations of all the different groups. So when you sell something, you don't need to know anything about the network. It's all handled automatically.
So all these different currency systems in all these 100 countries are actually connected to each other. So as a member of one, I could go from South Africa to London, and
absolutely.
Wow, that's
well, they're
incredible.
Not connected directly. As I said, they connected through this third-party thing in the middle.
Mm-hmm. It's like a Fedwire, a clearing.
My group doesn't
house.
know what groups they are in Australia, but it would communicate with the center, and then the center knows which group it is and where it's located. because it's all programmed in there. But it does it in a flash, you know. So it's kind of like, I suppose, the global monetary system has SWIFT, which handles transactions between banks and countries and so on. So it does the same kind of thing. But it's not very high tech, and because it's centralized and it's a very old-fashioned way of doing things, you know, it's vulnerable to, if the other side decides they don't like what we're doing anymore, they could take it down easily. Or if the censor just goes down for any reason, then the whole network stops, you know.
Mm.
Anyway, so that is a long version of the short story.
I mean, it was riveting. I'm not kidding.
There's obviously a lot more to it than that, but that's how we got to where we are today, basically.
Wow. Well, and it's inspiring to a lot of groups that are hoping to achieve the same kind of success that you have, with multiple community currencies around the world connected to each other. And I want to give Tomer a chance to talk about Seedbed, because he just launched something that, you know, aspires to be almost as cool as
I don't know if I want to talk after that. Like, it'll be just embarrassing, you know. It's not.
Well, but you have a different model, right? I mean,
I have a different story, so.
This is a different story, a different model, and this is the joy of this show, right? And so I'm really excited to see the juxtaposition of like a very successful network with a relatively simple system, and then relatively, and then, you know, someone who's pioneering a new system today and just launching one that has includes some kind of monetary theory and like actual systems. I don't know if you want to dive into it, Tomer, but
maybe I'll start from the beginning a bit about the story, because the story relates to like what Seedbed. And like, first of all, Tim, thank you. Inspiring. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your time. Just thank you.
A pleasure.
So I'll start a bit with my story. It's not as exciting, but it's a nice story to understand how did I get to Seedbed today. I think it's about in Israel doing the military service is compulsory. So 2007, 2010, served in the military in Israel, and after that, like every other good Israeli, you just leave everything behind and just go somewhere. I started my journey in South America and found myself rotating the world for about 3 years. At some point, I moved living in China. I lived in China for about 7 months in Beijing, learned in Beijing Dutch way. Didn't have a lot of money, and I, had to just work for the local businessman. And living up in a Western country, you get to see that, we want poverty. Like, poverty doesn't exist anymore in the Western world. At least that's what you think as a young person, obviously. But then you go to China, and in China it proves you that not only like when you're living there and you work inside the industry, not only we not win poverty, we just pushed it aside a little bit. We just like, we put it somewhere where we can't see it as much. That made me one of those people always angry at economy, just walking around angry, just talking about economy. Come on, bring it on, get angry. Obviously, I went to study economy because I'm in psychology. As those things. I met Bernard Liatar at 2013. He came to give a lecture in in Tel Aviv University, and that was mind-blowing. It's for the first time I see someone who presents the same harmony that traveling around the world, you get to be an organic farm and all this new age world that we're trying to describe, and all of a sudden someone is talking about how we can create an economy that is preserving the same kind of harmony. And for me, it was just like mind-blowing. As any other young entrepreneur, I came back, I traveled to Belgium to see what they did over there, traveled all the way back here. And just like, okay, I'm starting my own community currency. Let's just do that. Started me and some other students in Jerusalem University, in the Hebrew University, community currency. It was quite a simple system. You join the system, you get 40 Jerusalem lira, you add an item, here's another 20 for you, and so on and so on and so on. At some point, met me a bit of an older entrepreneur doing the same thing called Eyal Herzog. Eyal Herzog is really known today as the founder of Bancor. back then, they were the founders of Upcoin, who were doing the same thing. And they told me, well, Tomer, why don't you just, let go of your cute system? It was disgusting, like embarrassed of how the UI looked like. Let go of that and just join us. Join us to Upcoin. I joined to Upcoin, where I did the Jerusalem Lira. We had crazy engagement of thousands of people. They did other project, Hearts, that got to like 18,000 people, and other like pencils that we did with students, and we did smileys with mothers, and we did more and more and more community currencies, and same thing happened again and again. We get to thousands and thousands of people, but at some point, the economies just started collapsing one after another. Was quite frustrating, but what basically happened was around to the bank, just that there's no bank. So what happened, the richest people in the system started buying whatever they could and leave the system, because there was a moment of distrust because we printed too much money into the system. That's where people started converting between Jerusalem Lira to Hearts, to Purple Hearts, to Red Hearts, to all those weird currencies that we created over there. That's where I saw Eyal coming up with this vision of like a reserve currency. He read about Keynes' invention of Bancor. It's basically Keynes' invention. And Eyal was just like, okay, we'll do it with the shekel. Remember him doing it, we're talking about more than 6 years ago. Him running around telling everybody, yeah, we do it with the shekel. Like we put it in a reserve currency, Years later, Upcoin is closed. I move on. Bancor, we all know the story of Bancor, raising $153 million. I joined their team, managed a few different projects, where we started the research of, the same research that started at Upcoin, just flows on to the cryptographic world as all of a sudden there's a way of doing it. Like you don't need to face the classic regulation, as you can do it in the actual world. Over there, one of the projects I worked with was Real in Kenya. Traveled there about 2 times. And what was interesting to me was the amount of people who approached us and were like, okay, I want a community currency as well. And I was just like, well, you can do that, but the problem was, how is money created? Like, today I can explain it better than the problem that I had. Like, not the problem, but what I was missing. What we were missing, what I felt that, we told them, okay, we need a donation for that. It's a donation-based model. But someone's like, how am I going to bring like 200K donation? So, and that's where Seedbed came from. I left Bancor, started my own company, and now we need to talk about what's Seedbed. I was asked to explain what's our bonding curve or liquid tokens and liquidity in that sense, in order for us to have an easy conversation for everybody. So the idea is quite simple. When you create a new currency, there's a problem of liquidity. If you want to convert the new token I created to another token, I need to have someone on the other side who I can sell my token to, and he will give me another token. That's the double coincidence of ones. And what those inventions are doing, they're saying, well, okay, this new created token will have a reserve in another token. And this reserve is a smart contract. And every time someone would like to buy the new currency created, he can deposit money into the reserve, and the new currency will be minted. And if he wants to sell his community currency, he can always take this community currency, send it to the reserve, it will be destroyed, and he will withdraw money from the reserve. And that's basically the baseline of this idea. What we were looking to do is how to create a consensus mechanism, a way to allow people to agree on the way money is created. Working with Real, I was inspired by the idea of savings groups. And that's really connected to what's happening today in the classic world of crypto, which is the moving to proof of stake. The ability of people to stake their money, and that's how new minted currencies are created, because those are the people who supply consensus. They could supply trust into the system. So what Seedbed's model basically is, it's quite simple. It's a liquid token, starts at 100% reserves ratio, meaning back-to-back, one by one with the dollars. That has a proof of stake mechanism, meaning people can save their money together into a shared pool, but new money is minted into the people's pockets to incentivize them to bring money into the stake. And that's what reduces the reserves ratio, meaning we mint more tokens, but we keep them at the same price. And that's the consensus mechanism we added to the liquidity system. I know it sounds complicated, but I would share my screen just to show how it actually works, because it's nicer to understand. Like it's easier to use than to understand, to be honest. And that's basic what we're hoping for. We are developing our product on Fuse blockchain.
Oh, nice.
So we are also using the open source code of Fuse, and everything we develop is also open source on top of that, the wallet and the smart contract. And that's quite simple. So in the community, you have a balance of your, on the left side, it's the community currency, and on the right side is the reserve currency. And you always have the balance between them. If you want to convert between the two, you just go to convert and say, I want to convert my com for community, that's our example community, and I want to convert 5. That will just basically send the money now into the reserve, convert it. It will take us a while because it's on the blockchain, decentralized and everything. Calculate the prices, do whatever it needs to do, and send me back the money. It will take us a second to happen. As you've seen, there's no gas fees, no nothing. We took care of everything for the people. As you know, if we want to reach to a massive end user application, we need to be in a situation that people don't know the B word or the C word, depends to the extent, but blockchain or crypto. Like, they don't need to know about that. Even if I want to send my money, I can always do it just with my list of people. And if I would have had Griff here, I could just send him some money. And now the main question is, how do we control the monetary system, right? That's the complicated part. Well, that's quite simple. We have, as an admin, I have something called a reward rate. That's what's the reward for staking money in the community currency, and I can just change it. Money is printed on a weekly basis, and that's the management. That's how we manage a currency, with one parameter, the reward rate that people say would. Obviously, we advise not to have a tyrant of an admin that manage it by himself, but have the ability to create a consensus of small groups of people, and that's it. I could choose something else. I'm actually not the admin of this one. That's my CTO is the admin, to make sure we're always on our toes. So I cannot change the reward rate at the moment, and that's basically it. You can buy with credit card DAI, which is the example of the community of the reserve currency that we use here, and then just start trading with it. And that's how we slowly increase the money supply inside communities.
Wow, that's super cool. I'm glad to see people using Fuse. It seems like was it a pretty easy platform to build on, just from your experience?
Super easy. Like first of all, they were super helpful. Giving us time with the developers to understand the open source and etc. Yeah, it was pretty simple.
Fuse was one of the first groups we interviewed in this podcast. So glad to see people using it. Julio, did you say that there were some questions from the audience?
Yes, we have some questions. We have 2 questions first. Well, we have 3 questions, but the first one is from Matthew Slater. I guess it could be for both. So it's, how do you exchange rates? So Tim, in the community exchange systems, how do you said that you had different LEDs that had to communicate with each other. How do you do, or how do you go about exchanging rates? And I guess also for you, Tom, to know.
Yeah, well, firstly, we don't call them exchange rates, because that's a term from the monetary system where you are physically exchanging one currency to another. And as you know, in mutual credit, there is no real currency. It's just it's points. It's just a measurement. So you're measuring value. So we just call it a conversion rate. So it's like converting 1 inch into centimeters. So you have either 1 inch or 2.54 centimeters. So it both mean the same thing. So that's all we're doing is converting one number into another number. So most CES exchanges are based on the national currency. There are about 1/3 of them are time banks, where they use time as the unit of account. And some of the time banks even use different fractions of the hour. They could use half hour or 6 minutes, which means there's 10 units in an hour. So there's all kinds of variations. But the ones that use the national currency, how we convert the one into the other is not by using the official money exchange rates. We could use that, but as we know, those are not very fair. You know, if you're on a dollar or euro or something, it's not equivalent to the same amount. You know, if you convert that into South African rands or some, you know, third world currency, the exchange rate is usually terrible. But in real life, it's not like that. You know, if I buy a beer here, you know, a pint of beer, I know how much it costs. And when I go there, it feels like I'm paying 2 or 3 times for the same thing. So what we've done is for each community, we work out an average hourly wage rate for that area. Now, there are many ways of trying to establish a conversion between one thing and another. You know, people have suggested a basket of goods and all kinds of things. But those are very complicated. You know, it requires a lot of work to continually compare things, and then you can't really compare a lot of things. You know, how can you compare even something like apples from a place that grows apples with one that doesn't grow apples? You know, they have to import them. So we just use a system of what people expect in an hour and just use an average. It's not perfect, but it's probably better than anything else.
Everyone has the time scarcity that they have to deal with.
Everyone has that. So it works out, it actually miraculously works out as pretty fair, you know. So it's not the same as the global monetary rate. Sometimes it's quite close to that. But it's so for example, between South Africa and Australia, it's just an easy case. It's 10 to 1. So 10 rands equals $1. So the conversion rate then would be, well, in an hour, say in Australia, you'd expect $30 in an hour. And in South Africa, you'd say maybe expect 200 rand an hour. So then it would be 200 to 30. So make it 300, then it's 10 to 1, you know. So something like that. It's really easy to do. And in our back end, we have a kind of back end where you can change all these rates. And then you can change for an entire country. But sometimes even in a country, the rates differ. So especially in Europe, like in Northern Europe, the euro people earn maybe 30, 40 euros an hour, whereas in Spain or Portugal or Sicilia or somewhere, it's like 10, or Greece.
Yeah.
So we try to overcome those differences by just setting them for each group, a conversion rate. And when you trade through the third-party clearing central, all those rates are there. So no one has to think about it. And normally it is the seller who enters the transactions anyway. So if like recently I went to Australia and I had all my accommodation on the system there, and I don't have to do anything. I just go there and sleep, and then when I'm finished, I go home. And the seller then enters the transaction into the computer in their currency. All the conversions are done, and when I get home, my account's debited in my local currency. All the conversions are done. So you don't even have to think about the exchange rates. You don't even, or conversion rates rather, you don't have to even know about them. So it's all just happening in the background.
That's elegant.
So it's very neat. And it's not complex. You don't have to go to Australia thinking, oh, what's the conversion rate?
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like there's some kind of beautiful, you don't have to even exchange money, right? It's almost like you just go and stay at your place, and you know, you just kind of, the seller updates it. They just know your ID number or something. Do you have like
you have an account number, and then that's it.
They just say, hey, what's your account number? Okay,
what's
cool.
Your account number.
That's really nice.
On that, there's actually a question that might be useful to contrast with Tomer. Sanel Contreras asks, Linking the currency to the reserve does not make the currency vulnerable to conventional money or crypto circumstances, for example, inflation or volatility. How do you deal with that? That's a question for Tomer.
So first of all, yes, if I put a stable coin of the US dollars in the reserve, relates in a way the community currency to the value of the US dollars. That's one. But how do we face this problem? Two ways. First of all, the reserve ratio started at 100%, meaning at the beginning, it's 100% pegged to the US dollars. But as time goes by, people buy the currency more, the reserves ratio goes down. Basically, the community currency is detaching from the currency in reserve as the reserves ratio becomes from 100, moves down to 90%, 80%, as at some point it has a sovereign value in a way in the external world as time goes by. But that's not the only way we face it. Second way we face it, and that's actually not something that came from us, it came from the communities that we work with. We're working with communities, and some of I'll just tell the specific story. We're working with the Huichol in Mexico, Huichol tribe, and we told them, yes, we use a stable coin, and they were like, can we put gold in the reserve? They're like, what? That was, first of all, the most surprising thing to hear. And they're like, yeah, you know what, the extra money that we have, we convert it to gold, and yeah, we put gold in the reserve. And it was mind-blowing. And the day after, we have a project with the Maoris. And actually the project that we do with the Maori in New Zealand, we do it with another company called Beef Ledger. And Beef Ledger is putting NFTs on cows' ears and tracking them live supply chain on the blockchain. But basically they are creating a stable coin to free range, organic beef. And over there, we will use beef tokens, the reserve currency, meaning it's like you can back it by whatever you want. And then, the next question will be, and so how does that connect to the external system? Like how we create fiat? And we just use liquidity pool. So you have community currency that is backed by, it could be, we have a project in Germany by organic food baskets, and we have in New Zealand, Australia, that we do, the companies from Australia, the community from New Zealand, never mind, by beef, and we have it that we can do it by gold, but basically you can choose whatever you want to do, whatever you want to put in the reserve, as it's your community, we are just an app. Use it, put whatever you want in reserve for that.
Beef reserves, man, that's incredible.
That's amazing. It's amazing. Like it's not even my idea. I cannot even take it as my idea.
It's beautiful, honestly. Any more questions, Julio?
Yes, we have another question, actually for Tim. It's again Matthew Slater asking, why haven't you upgraded to blockchain? And what sort of, I guess the question is probably also asking in terms of developers, in terms of the sort of manpower there, wind power there. What sort of needs do you have there, or why don't you upgrade to a blockchain?
Well, I would like to know myself. Our software is very old. I explained we started developing this thing I started right in about 2000. I started playing around with this stuff, and it was launched in 2003. And in those days, there wasn't much choice of software. It was all Microsoft. Everything was Microsoft, and we used Microsoft ASP as our programming language. And then this thing grew and grew and grew and got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was, years before PHP even became popular. And all the modern, of course, this was all done way before smartphones and mobile phones and all that. So the platform was for the desktop. And no one had even heard of a blockchain until, 10 years ago or so. And but we would very much like to, it's a very traditional model with a central database, and it's vulnerable, not only just for, physical vulnerability, but, if the state decides to take it down, they can very easily do it. They simply block it. Whereas a blockchain would prevent that, and your your data is distributed. So we would like to move in that direction. We've been trying for years to find funding. It sounds weird for a community currency to go and look for funding. It makes it sound as if it's dependent. I think you all have the same problem. It's like this mental clash, you know, you're trying to reinvent money so that you can get rid of that one, but you say, please fund our system so we can destroy your money system.
Yeah. There's always needs to be a transition, right?
So you need that transition. We've had a number of attempts to raise funds. I think we've finally got it, you know, and we are starting to develop new software, and it definitely will be blockchain based. And it will be all the modern stuff, you know, it will be public domain software. I wouldn't call ours proprietary software, but because it's so old and sort of handcrafted, no one wants to touch it. You know, I could put it out there and no one would even bother to look at it because it's in a language that no one even uses anymore.
Wow, that's so cool. So you actually are working with a team to convert it and put it on a blockchain.
We are.
Wow, that's incredible. I had no idea. That's really cool.
I don't know when that will happen, but it may also be a flash in the pan, but we're trying. We just keep trying.
Do you know if you need any help with that, or if, I mean,
it's possible, yes. It's possible.
Where would people go to learn more about this action?
Well, it's still in the planning stage. We haven't written a line of code yet. It's
that's
still
good.
trying to work out the whole structure of how it's going to work. And it's actually been done by people who understand all this stuff more than I do. I'm kind of getting a bit out of it now, you know.
Yeah.
I don't want to learn new systems. I've played my role and done my thing, and now, you know.
Yeah. Wow, that's really incredible news. I have a question that I really want to make sure that we get answered. Sorry to interrupt the audience, but Tim, you've seen so many currencies succeed and fail, and I'm really curious, what do you think are the most common things that make currencies fail?
Well, I think one of the problems is that we think in the terms of currencies. Now, what we've learned in the community exchange system is that, you know, there's not one way of exchanging. So really, exchange is the top concept and not a currency. So,
oh man, I've been saying it wrong. I've been saying currency exchange. It's community exchange systems.
Yeah, it's community.
Much better.
Exchange. Well, that's just to say that it's community based. But you've got your starting point is exchange, and how do human beings exchange? So if you look through history, there's been a multitude of different ways of exchanging. And what we understand is money is a fairly recent phenomenon. You know, I mean, you can go back maybe 1,000 years, 2,000 years, and certainly there were coins, you know, the Romans had coins and things. But for the majority of humanity, there was no money system or even money as we understand it. There were other ways of, you know, gifting and all kinds of mechanisms that people had for exchanging. And those still apply today. You know, if we're trading one-to-one, why is there a need for money? Why can't we just keep records? You know, and so what we're trying to do in the exchange system is to not provide one monopolistic tool. And imagine that we can reinvent money. So money has its power. It's a control system, as we all know, and it's a redistribution system. So we do all the work and the money goes to the rich guys through interest payments and all the rest of it. So they're sucking our energy all the time. So, you know, half of our energy goes to governments and to pay banks and things. So we're trying to create an exchange system or ways of exchange that eliminates all the parasites sucking our energy and our wealth away from us. And we don't want to replace their monopolistic system. And that's where their power comes from, is that they have monopolized money. And they want all exchange to be in terms of money, because the more that we use their system, that's why they're thinking of one global currency, They want everything to be monetized. All life on earth must be monetized, even your breath. You know, now even your health will be monetized and you won't be able to do anything unless you've got a card from them. And that is the problem, is that we're all trying to think of one magical system that's going to replace their terrible system. And the thing is to get away from that idea. And not everything has to be on the books. You know, why do we need to aggregate every single transaction that takes place in the world so that the parasites can take their cut out of it? So if we can, a lot of exchange can take place without being on any books or any records, and we find ways to facilitate exchange using non-monetary methods. Surely we should have all of those. So we need to create a multitude of tools. So we have time banking, we have mutual credit, we have a thing that's called time trading, where people do things for each other and simply record how much time they spend on each other. And then when they reach equity or equal hours or whatever you want to call it, then they can stop that account or continue. I mean, there's bartering, and bartering under a computerized system becomes viable because you can make those connections between the wants. You know, always they've said, well, bartering doesn't work. That's why we have money, because you have to have a double coincidence of wants and all that nonsense. But with computers, you can make those connections very easily. So you can have bartering and swapping and gifting and time trading and collective projects and all kinds of things. There's a multitude of different ways. And if you look through history or study how anthropologists tell us how people used to have exchange systems, not involving coins as we understand it, or just keeping records, and there's tally sticks and all kinds of things. There's a multitude of things, and we should be packaging all these together and not competing against each other, and not thinking that we can come up with the ultimate system that's going to replace money, because then we're really back to where money is. Someone will hijack that system, take control of it, and then we've got our one world currency. So we should actually move in the other direction and think of all the different ways that we can exchange things. So we need to look at one-to-one trading, one-to-many, many-to-one, many-to-many, and then all the other dimensions of exchange, you know, whether the people are close to you, whether they're far from you, whether you trust them or whether you don't trust them. And there's all kinds of dimensions that are involved in exchange. So I think instead of trying to invent some ultimate system, can't we pool all these systems that are non-monetary, define what situations those currencies are useful for, and let's all just get together and work together and try and work outside the globalist system, you know. And
I'm going to try to
that's where
recap.
freedom is, you know.
I want to try to recap that just a little bit to see if I can extract an answer to my question that why a lot of these community exchange systems. No, it's okay. It was a beautiful.
I didn't really answer your question. I kind of got
but I think you hinted at it, and I want to see if I got it. Yeah. Where it's not about trying to replace a monetary system. It's instead trying to focus on what facilitates exchange within a community, and having that mindset of serving the community's needs for just exchanging value, as opposed to trying to put on, oh, we need to create a new money.
Yeah.
Is that
so? And also the main thing is that it's about people. You know, a lot of people, a lot of groups sign up to create a new exchange on CS, and there's something on the website that says an exchange is not the computer instance. That is just a tool. An exchange is people, real people on the ground. And that is, as far as I've seen, has always been when these groups fail, is when they think that the thing is computerized. Simply create an instance on the computer and it's just going to magically form itself. And it doesn't. You require real work on the community, on the ground. You need to organize markets, you need to have meetings, you need to train people how to do these things. And you need to bring people together and constantly, I don't know, I mean, that's really how the money system works. We have all these wonderful things that we do as people, you know, we go and sit in pubs and we go to movies and concerts and things, and money allows us to do that. But if we're going to do all that stuff online, it's not going to happen. So it has to bring people together, and they got to feel it. And that, of course, requires a team of people who understand this and who prepare to put in time and to devote their energies to it, and not believe that it's just going to magically come out of a computer. That way is guarantee for failure.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Well, Julio, is there one last question that we can go for?
Yeah, I think somewhere I heard the analogy made in regards to your life team that escaping the money system is sort of like escaping a prison.
Yeah.
And I would ask you then, what is this freedom then? How
Yeah. That's a good question, because I didn't get into this alternative exchange system or monetary system, whatever you want to call it, just because it was, just fun or something like that, or just curious to see where it would go. For me, it's always, well, my whole life has been, I don't like to use the word politically driven because that makes us think of political parties, but sort of ideologically driven. I've always wanted to correct all the injustices in the world. That's why I got involved in the anti-apartheid struggle, and that's why I stayed there. And of course, money, as you know, is what controls the world, and those who control the money control us. And I still believe that exchange that's what life is, really. It's about exchanging what we have and can do for each other, And so if you have a mechanism that controls that, then you control people. But if you have a system that is not controlling, that the people themselves control, then that is, for me, that is freedom, because you're not being controlled anymore, and you're not a slave to someone else's system. So I see the kind of monetary system, excuse me, as a giant prison that's trapped humanity for maybe thousands of years. And today, I think we all feel even more trapped than ever. We get born into this world and we learn about money, and we go to school and all they teach us is about money and how to make money, and that the whole object of life is to earn money, and there's nothing else in life that's as important as getting money, and that's how most people see it, And then we take out mortgages on our houses, and we buy cars, and take out car loans and educational loans and this loan and that loan, and we're all just slaves paying back these rich guys for money that they just create out of fresh air and all that. So we're slaves, and how do we unlock the prison? Do we have to have some real high-tech thing, or can we escape from this prison like we did, making wooden keys, which is low-tech? So we need some low-tech systems that everyone can understand, that everyone can make, not some highfalutin things that require billions of dollars and huge computers and computer mining and all sorts of stuff that use up a lot of energy. We need something very simple and basic that everyone can use and can create, can understand. And we mustn't believe that we just invent the key to that final door, and once we've got that, we just hand out these keys and we've solved humanity's problems. It won't be like that. It's a number of steps. Like in our prison, we had to open each door one after the other, and each time you open the next door, you got a new vista, a new vision, because now you could see what's on the far side of that door, and then you knew what to do after you opened that door or barrier. So it's very much the same thing. We can't have a plan right in the beginning because we don't know what's beyond all these other barriers. So all we can do is take it step by step, open one door, open the next door, open the next door, and using our low-tech wooden keys, open a subsequent door until we get to that final door. And what that final door is, who knows? In our prison, we didn't have the key for that final door and we had to break it. So maybe in real life, that final door, we have to use a little bit of force. I don't know. We can get away with not using force, that'll be great. But this is how I see it. So we're trapped in this prison, and the freedom is when we control our own means of exchange, and we're not used as, I don't know, slaves really for the monetary system for the rich guys.
Man,
So yeah, that's my take.
that is beautiful. That was so beautiful. Thank you so much. I literally got goosebumps halfway through that. So really, it's been an honor to host you guys. Let's just do one last round of like telling people where they can learn more about the different projects that we have. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to the Common Stack YouTube channel so you can be alerted for the next time that we do this. We do this call every 2 weeks. And I'm Griff Green from the Common Stack. You can find out more about the Common Stack's work by following us on Twitter @CommonStack. Go to commonstack.org, or also join our Telegram group. That's just t.me/CommonStack. Tomer, do you want to tell people where they can find out more about Seedbed?
Yes. So basically, first of all, if anyone wants to experiment with our product and have his own community currency, he's welcome. He's just a few steps away to give you a community currency of your own with bonding curve, everything, liquid token, whatever you want, all of this over there to start experimenting with. Either our website that is being redesigned now, so it's seedbed.io, or Telegram that is just, I think it's just Seedbed. Just check it. Yeah, it's seedbed, t.me/seedbed, or my email, tomer@seedbed.io.
Nice. Julio, you want to talk about circles?
Yeah, well, more than circles, also the Community Currency Alliance, sort of what we want to do, team and also Tomer and everybody who's watching, is really to try to connect all the young and old souls in this space to try to really create this plurality that you're speaking of, Tim. So we can gather all the wooden keys from the planet and figure out how to build something together that withstands, the ages. Yeah, and not to build, I guess, these monopolistic things, but really just the stuff that have many legs, that can withstand, the test of time, and exchange.
Exchange is a top concept.
Yeah. Tim, where can we learn more? Where can we learn more about your upcoming projects?
Well, the Community Exchange System website is stuff. I mean, it's not really a terribly exciting space because it's really just a wrapper around our system. It's just a sort of WordPress site to make it look a little nicer. And there's just some blurb there, but it's not really a lot of activity. The occasional article appears there. So the activity is really once you've logged into it. But anyone can join up, and well, obviously, if there's no exchange group in your area, there's no point in joining. But then you could start a group. Anyone anywhere in the world can simply sign up, and then you've got a new group. But as I said, it's got to have a community behind it, and not just a name, And it's very simple. You simply think up a name for your currency, and you put it in, and you give a few details of where you are, and then you're away, and then it's approved, and then you're on the system, and you can trade around the world. There's no cost involved or anything like that. So it's just a tool that we've made available for everybody. The website is community-exchange.org. Go there and have a look and join up.
Wow. Thank you, guys.
There are Facebook pages, but they come and go. There's been many of them. Many groups set up their own pages. You can just search for Community Exchange System.
I want to say thank you to Griff. Griff, you're the man. Thank you for doing that every second Friday. Good job.
Hey, thanks,
you. Griff. Thanks for bringing us together. It's wonderful.
Yes.
Really, it's all Gustav and Julio. I'm just the guy that smiles and laughs, right?
So definitely, Julio, thank you very much, and Gustavo that is not here, that brought us all together.
Yeah.
Thank you a lot. Very important.
Anything we can do to continue these efforts, we're happy to help.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Another great call.